What if I told you that 60 years ago, South Korea, the country that gave us Samsung, BTS, and Squid Game, was one of the poorest countries on Earth? In 1960, South Korea's GDP per capita was roughly $1,000. That's lower than Ghana, lower than Sudan, lower than Bolivia. South Korea had just survived a devastating war that wiped out most of its industry, its infrastructure, and nearly 4 million of its people. Today, South Korea's GDP per capita stands at $36,000, more than 8 times higher than Indonesia's, and firmly in the league of high-income, developed nations. This is not a story about luck. This is not a story about oil. South Korea has almost no natural resources. What it has is a story about deliberate, sometimes brutal, sometimes brilliant choices, and what those choices can teach countries like Indonesia that are still searching for the path forward. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly which pieces of the South Korea economic miracle can be copied, which cannot, and what the honest answer is to the question: can Indonesia do what Korea did? To understand the miracle, you need to understand just how bad things were. The Korean War ended in 1953 with an armistice, not a peace treaty. The country was physically destroyed. Major cities were reduced to rubble. Industrial output had collapsed. And critically, South Korea had virtually no natural resources. No significant oil, no minerals, no forests large enough to export. What South Korea did have, 60% of its land covered by mountains, difficult for farming, a population of 25 million people living in desperate poverty, and total dependence on American foreign aid just to keep the country running. In the 1960s, South Korea and Indonesia had comparable GDP per capita. Both were poor, both were agricultural economies. Both were navigating post-colonial uncertainty with new governments. The question, the really important question, is why did one of them transform, while the other stayed stuck? In 1961, a general named Park Chung-hee seized power in a military coup. He was authoritarian. He silenced political opponents. But he had one consuming obsession: making Korea rich. Park launched a series of 5-year economic development plans. The government didn't just set targets, it actively directed credit, resources, and policy toward specific industries. This is what economists call state-directed capitalism, and it's very different from the free market model that most Western development economists were prescribing at the time. Phase 1 in the 1960s, textiles, footwear, cheap manufactured goods. Build the base capital. Phase 2 in the 70s, steel, shipbuilding, petrochemicals, heavy industry. Climb the value chain. Phase 3 by the 80s and 90s, semiconductors, electronics, automobiles. Compete at the global frontier. This is how Samsung went from selling fish and noodles in 1938 to becoming the world's largest producer of memory chips. The South Korea economic miracle wasn't spontaneous, it was engineered. The government channeled subsidized loans and export incentives to large family-owned conglomerates, the chaebol, like Samsung, Hyundai, Lotte, and LG. The deal was simple. You perform, you get support. You fail to export and grow, the support disappears. This created a system of high-pressure, high-growth capitalism, with the state as the engine driver. Critics, and there are many, point to corruption, inequality, and the suppression of small businesses that came with it. The chaebol system created wealth, but also concentrated it. It's a complicated legacy. Here's the part of the South Korea development model that doesn't get enough credit: the obsessive investment in people. Because Korea had no natural resources, its only real asset was its people, and the government understood that early. Beginning in the 1950s and accelerating through the Park era, Korea invested heavily in universal education. In 1969, Park Chung-hee enacted a radical policy. He equalized secondary school entrance. No more elite middle schools. The same quality curriculum, the same standards across the whole country. This was partly political. He wanted to reduce elite privilege. But it was also brilliantly functional. It gave the booming manufacturing sector a steady, educated, trainable workforce exactly when it needed one. Compare that to Indonesia today. Indonesia spends 20% of its national budget on education, one of the highest allocations in Asia. But quality is deeply unequal between Java and the outer islands. Spending money is not the same as getting results. Korea's lesson isn't just invest more. It's equalize the quality, align education with what the economy actually needs, and be patient. Human capital is a 30-year bet, but it's the safest bet a developing country can make. Here's the third pillar of the South Korea economic miracle, and arguably the most important one. They didn't build an economy for themselves. They built one for the world. In the 1950s, exports were less than 1% of Korea's GNP. By the late 70s, they were over 30%. From 1962 to 1982, Korean exports grew at an average of 30% per year. 30% per year for 2 decades. This export-led industrialization strategy forced Korean companies to meet global standards, not just local ones. You cannot hide behind a protected domestic market forever when your business model depends on selling to the world. It's a form of enforced quality control at the national level. Indonesia today still earns most of its export revenue from raw commodities: palm oil, coal, nickel. The government's hilirisasi policy, pushing for downstream processing, is a step in the right direction. But Korea's lesson says that's not enough. The goal isn't just to process nickel into ferronickel. The goal is to one day be inside the EV battery, inside the semiconductor, inside the device on your wrist. Let's not pretend Korea's story is a straight line upward. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis hit. The Korean won collapsed by 50%. Major chaebols went bankrupt overnight. Korea had to go to the IMF for a $58 billion bailout. It was the most humiliating economic moment in the country's modern history. But here's what matters. Korea reformed. Quickly, seriously. It restructured the chaebols. It liberalized its financial system. It invested in R&D and pivoted towards software and technology services. And within 2 years, it was growing again. Indonesia also went through the 1997 crisis, and it was arguably worse. GDP fell 13%. The political fallout ended the Suharto era. But Indonesia's recovery was slower, more painful, and more politically fragile. The difference wasn't just economic policy. It was institutional quality and speed of reform. So here's the honest answer everyone wants to know. Can Indonesia do what Korea did? The direct copy-paste doesn't work. Korea is a small, geographically compact, ethnically homogeneous country. Indonesia is an archipelago of 17,000 islands with 270 million people and 700 languages. Coordination is 10 times harder. The political economy is fundamentally different. Also, Korea didn't have the resource curse. The absence of oil and minerals actually forced Korea to innovate. Indonesia's natural wealth can be a trap if it removes the pressure to build capabilities. But here's what can be copied. First, pick industrial priorities and fund them seriously, not spread everything thin across thousands of programs. Second, obsess over educational quality and equality, not just spending. Third, treat export success as the ultimate performance metric. And fourth, when the crisis comes, and it will, reform fast and reform seriously. Korea's miracle wasn't luck. It was a set of hard choices made consistently over 30 years. The question for Indonesia, for any developing economy, is whether there is the political will to make those same kinds of hard choices and to stick with them. If you found this video useful, leave a comment below. Which of Korea's lessons do you think Indonesia is most likely or least likely to follow? And if you want to go deeper, my next video examines why Malaysia and Indonesia, once nearly identical economies, have diverged so dramatically over the last 50 years. I'll see you there.